was doing good financially, if Africa was considered as a decent place to be in, if Africa was considered as a developed place, everybody would want to come from there. When people hear the word African, something interesting happened. For some people, it means pride, culture, motherland, home country, homeland, home continent, and all of that. But for so many people, especially outside Africa, it means backwardness, it means primitive, it means something that is disgusting, it means something that's not admirable. For some people, for so many people, especially people outside Africa, this means people who are black, and also people who are not black. It's just somewhere that they don't want to be. They would rather be anywhere else apart from Africa. And this is really interesting, and even to think about like what really happened. Where did the notion that Africa is primitive come from? Where is the notion that Africa is behind come from? I feel like we cannot talk about Africa being primitive or being considered to be primitive and backward without talking about colonization. I feel like up to date, and there's a video that I did talking about how colonization still affects Africa to date. We cannot talk about how Africans view Africa as backward, as primitive, how Africans have a lot of self-hate. We do have a lot of dislike for ourselves because we've been told over and over again that we are not the best people that there is, that our continent is one of the worst that there can ever be. We don't have anything to offer. Well, all of these notions was brought by the colonizers so that they can be able to make it easy for themselves to be able to exploit our resources. Because when you come to me and you tell me that like I have nothing to offer, literally, even when you take this something small that I have, I'm like even grateful that you're taking that away from me. Okay, so I feel like that's where the notion comes from, that Africa is primitive and behind. It comes from the colonizers. First of all, I have talked about the way African languages are considered to be primitive, and if you cannot speak in the colonizers' language, for example, English, French, German, if you cannot speak in these languages, you're considered to be primitive, to be backward, and all of that. I feel like African languages are not primitive, they're not backward, and to even say the least, they're just languages. It's only that we are being forced, or we've been forced to adopt the colonizers' languages, because these are the languages that would give us opportunities in the international market. Okay, so the whole idea about African languages being primitive, being backward, Africans not being able to speak European languages, I don't see that as being behind. I just see that as people who have their own languages, people who had their own life before it was disrupted by the colonizers. Okay, which brings me to the other point where like I'm gonna be talking about when you look at so many Africans in the continent, even outside the continent, especially Africans who are outside the continent, most of them don't want to be called African because for them it's an insult. And this insult is like when you call an African, is like you're trying to associate them with a very dark place that they have really gotten out of, especially Africans in the diaspora. And most people don't want to be associated with that. And I feel like we cannot talk about the whole notion of being Africa being considered as primitive without talking about black people abroad, but black people in other continents. Okay, I recently, when I was looking through Instagram, I saw this page. There's this lady, she's I think Nigerian, and she was talking about the first time she moved to America. When she was in Africa, I think she's Nigerian, and she's also American. I don't know the narrative, but basically she used to call herself African American even when she was in Nigeria. And black Americans were in her comment section saying that like she's not black, she's African. Okay, and this brings me to another point where like even black people abroad, black people in these other continents, for example in America, in UK, basically don't want to be associated with Africa. Like they want to say that like they are black, they are not African. Okay, while I see the explanation behind that because I have had conversations with black Americans and I see their notion. They've never been to this place. How would you call them African? Do we call Europeans in America, do we call them European Americans? So I can honestly see that, but I feel like if Africa was successful, if Africa was doing good, most black people would want to be associated with Africa. For example, when you call white Americans Europeans, they really don't get offended because they honestly know that they are descendants from Europe. They come from Europe. That's just what they know. Okay, but the level of offense that black people usually take, I don't care if it's black people in Britain, black people in the US. I think black people in Jamaica or Jamaicans and people in the Caribbean, honestly, I think they do identify Africa and they respect Africa, but I feel like most black people abroad, they really don't want to be associated with Africa, to say the least. And I feel like it's just because of the stereotypes. If Africa was doing good financially, if Africa was considered as a decent place to be in, if Africa was considered as a developed place, everybody would want to come from there. And that's why I keep wanting to like call for like, I feel like Africans in the continent should make sure that they like, if Africans in the continent unite, if all African countries unite and Africa is able to speak from one tone, if maybe Africa could be one of the strongest continents that there ever is, because I honestly believe that Africa is one of the richest continents that there ever is. Okay, so the only problem is the fact that we are not united. If Africa was to unite, I feel like black people abroad would be more respected, they would be listened to more, and all of that. Okay, so which also brings me to another aspect whereby I feel like African heritage is one of the richest heritage that there ever will be in the whole world. Okay, we are talking about ancient civilization, we are talking about Egypt, we are talking about Mali, we are talking about the great Zimbabwe, all the culture that comes with this, all the fact that Africans were civilized by themselves. When you look at Egypt, most people want to consider Egypt to be part of I think Middle East, because they don't want to acknowledge that Africans had the ability of developing by themselves. Egyptians had their own calendar. When you look at Ethiopia, they still use their own calendar up to date. How do we say that these people are not civilized where they were able to do such great things? Okay, I feel like it's literally ignorant to even say the least. Okay, so and I feel like it's also an injustice to talk about Africa as one culture. Africa is not one culture. It comprises of so many cultures, so many languages, and we cannot sit here and say like, you know what, Africa is primitive. The whole idea about Africa being primitive not only shows a society that refuses to accept people who don't look like them, but also a society that is full of racism, and a society that's full of just wanting to be better than some people. I feel like everybody else is so happy in the whole world. When you talk about Europeans, we talk about Asians, talk about all races, everybody feels like they are better than Africans, which is literally everybody feels like they are better than Africans. But I just want to tell you guys that I don't think anybody, and I don't think Africa is better. I don't feel like Africans are better than anybody, but I also don't feel like any of these other places are better than Africa. I just feel like it's just the fact that we're coming from different places with different experiences. Okay, Africa might have delayed in terms of development and in terms of like growth. It might be one of the continents which houses most of the third world countries, but you cannot sit here and tell us that you guys are third world countries without identifying what you guys did to us, without identifying what these countries did to Africa. Okay, so if anything, I don't think, or I just want to tell people black people or like Africans who are somewhere out there and you're really ashamed to be Africa or you don't want to be African, just know that like there's pride in your culture, there's pride in who you are, there's pride in who you are gonna be, and there's nothing that's ever gonna take the fact that you're African away from you. Okay, so I think what I would like to say, or like the call to action, because of course you gotta have a call to action, I would say that I want every black person, I don't care if you come from Africa or you don't, I want you to speak so highly of Africa, the continent, because if you are a black person, where where is the origin of black people in Africa? Okay, so you gotta respect, even though you don't believe you come from Africa, or you don't believe in Africa, or you think Africans are stupid or primitive or whatever, just speak highly of Africa. Okay, I see Europeans all the time speaking so highly of Europe, you know, of romanticizing places like France, Italy. You even see these shows, for example, Emily in Paris. These shows are meant to market these places, to show how these places are beautiful, how these places are whimsical. Okay, why don't we do that for African countries? Why don't we come and go to Serengeti in Tanzania and video that? Why don't we show that? Okay, why do we only want to show the part where like we are living in misery? And I'm not saying misery doesn't exist. I come from the misery, I know what that means, but I can sit here and just dislike myself because of that. I can only think about how can I moving forward. How can I be able to make myself better? How can I be able to look for opportunities even if there's no opportunities? Okay, so I think what I'm gonna say, let us love ourselves as Africans. Let us speak so highly of our continent. And I want to challenge every European or every white person, every Asian person who is out there. Let us not sit out there with a lot of ignorance and say that like Africa is a dark place to be, is this hole that you don't want to be in. Let us not say that. Let us remember what happened to Africa, what happened to people with African descent. Let us remember the colonization. Let us remember the transatlantic slave trade. And if anything, I don't expect you to when you see any black person, I don't expect you to be saying sorry every now and then. But at the same time, I don't expect you to sit there and say, oh my God, these people are so isolated. They don't think, you know, that doesn't represent Africa. That's not who Africans are. That's not who we are as Africans, okay, or even as black people. Okay, so thank you so much if you watched so far. Thank you so much, guys. Consider liking and subscribing. Let me know, why do you think what was the question? Why is African heritage viewed as primitive? Why are Africans viewed as primitive? Okay, I've talked about the language, the fact that most people believe, the fact that most Africans can speak the colonial languages, they think that they are stupid or primitive. They literally can speak other 5 languages, okay, and you only know one language. And we, even for example right now I'm speaking to you guys in English, okay, that doesn't mean that I still can't speak my five languages. Okay, so let us chat in the comment section. Let me know something that I said that stuck with you. Let me know some of the things that you wish I said. Why is Africa heritage viewed as primitive? And let us interact with the comments. Guys, can kindly share these videos, especially when it comes, I share every video that I see when it comes to Africa, when it comes to black people, because I am on a journey to love myself as a black person, and also to allow other black people to love themselves. So until next time, bye bye.